So, Wonder Egg Priority, the psychological horror series made by Cloverworks Studio, had its 13th episode that aired back in March. But as many of you know, the series was incomplete and left us with more questions than answers. The special episode just aired, so now I thought was the perfect time to deep dive and talk about this series, but in order to do that, we need to dress up for the occasion. Okay, that should do it. Wonder Egg Priority, when it was first announced, was a series that I was really hyped to watch. It was a show that looked like it was going to talk about very serious topics, deep diving into depression, harassment, and suicide. So what is Wonder Egg Priority? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do right now and deep dive into the conversation. Just a little backstory, we follow a character named Ai Oto, who is a 14-year-old girl. Oh, side note, do you notice how a lot of anime have 14-year-old protagonists? Well, I'm actually making a video all about this topic and why this is so common in anime. So you will definitely want to hit that notification bell and subscribe when I drop that video. But back on topic, Ai has been subject to bullying and because of this became very isolated and put up a lot of emotional walls. So this caused her to of course be very isolated and have no friends. Though one day a new girl shows up, Coelho, and Coelho refused to let Ai's walls get in the way and with persistence started breaking down her emotional restraints and eventually she succeeded. Ai is now smiling again and has a new look on life. This, unfortunately, doesn't last long. As I mentioned, this is a pretty heavy series and it deals with some serious topics, and so unfortunately we find out that Coelho committed suicide by jumping off of the roof of the school building. This was of course incredibly traumatic for Ai, and she quickly goes back to her former self, isolating from the world and is dealing with some severe depression, and understandably so. We then see her with a bug who's talking to her, and this of course feels really odd, but Ai realizes she's in a dream, and when she wakes back up, this is where she finds an egg that becomes the catalyst that drives this entire series. I love Ai's design. The bright yellow sweater contrasting with the blue highlights from her hair, and she has this incredibly rare condition that only affects 1% of humans on Earth called heterochromia, which is when someone is born with two different colored eyes. I've said this time and time again, but Cloverworks is just incredible when it comes to animation and design. They always knock it out of the park and make me forget that not all studios live up to this level of perfection and detail, but the bright, vibrant colors of Ai also feel like a piece of symbolism which contrasts her deep, dark depression, which I found oddly kind of beautiful. So with this incredible story concept and beautiful design, you feel like you're in for something truly special. But we do have one glaring problem. I mentioned earlier that Ai was in a dream and had this insect speak to her, and when she woke up, she found this egg in her bed. She doesn't understand what this egg is for, but eventually we see her sneaking out of her house and going to her school, and once she enters the bathroom, the egg hatches and we see another person. She learns that she needs to help defeat this person's fears by defeating the enemy, and if she accomplishes this goal, she will eventually get her wish and bring Kyoto back to life. So at first I was totally on board with this. The villain that I would have to take down was the embodiment of the person that caused the person to take their own life. So of course there is a lot of symbolism because Ai and the person she's helping rescue would work together to overcome their fears, and by doing so, they conquer their abuser that caused them to take their own life. I found the human forms a lot more threatening and terrifying. I really like how they didn't really seem to have a face and it was all pixelated, which only made them more intimidating. Though, okay, this is where the issue persists. These villains eventually take on a monster looking form and they just kind of look... ridiculous. I'm not even kidding. Every villain just looked more and more ridiculous. One had these massive boobs that was just like, what were they even thinking? This seriously took away from the deep symbolism the series was going for and kinda just turned it into a generic monster anime. Now, the series has a lot of symbolism, and as I mentioned, I get that this monster form is presumably how the victim sees them in their eyes. So I get it and it makes sense, but for a show that was taking itself so seriously with incredibly serious topics, these design choices really kind of ruined it for me. This series had everything going for it, and I feel something as simple as utilizing the original human forms of the villains was a lot more impactful to the progression of the story and the serious tone they were setting up throughout the series. Now, this was a major issue in my eyes, but it still didn't completely ruin the anime for me. It still had a lot going for it, so let's continue now on more of some of the good points.
古典的な嫌がらせね。小糸ちゃんがどうしてこんな。
At first glance, your first impression of this series is, oh, look, it's a bunch of cute girls doing cute things. But as we already know, it's a lot deeper than that. At its core, the anime is all about feelings and trying to convey different feelings that we have living in a society. As I already mentioned, these feelings are portrayed through various serious topics and the repercussions that an event can have and affect the people that you love. One of the most obvious ones being suicide. We see just how it affects friends and family that you leave behind. Ai eventually meets 3 other girls, Rika, Niru, and Momo, who all have different things they are suffering from and have their own battles to overcome. Niru is very reserved, but we find out that she was violently stabbed by her own sister, and while recuperating in the hospital, she found out that her sister committed suicide jumping off a bridge. Niru has some pretty bad scars across her back and obviously has complicated feelings towards her sister. Rika, who speaks her mind, she was a junior idol and had a small fan base. She learned one of her biggest fans was shoplifting in order to give her gifts because she couldn't afford to keep giving her money. Rika also makes a comment about this fan's weight, and this caused the fan to starve herself and eventually pass away. Momo is often mistaken for being a boy due to her appearance. One of her female friends eventually made a romantic advance on her, and she rejected her. Later, Momo found out that she also took her own life. So as you can see, all of these girls have something to fight for and are all trying to bring back the person they lost with purchasing Wonder Eggs. The backstory to all of the main characters is quite tragic, but as they all become friends and grow their bond, they each help one another push forward and find some peace within themselves. This is one of the things that I truly enjoyed about Wonder Egg Priority because it's not all doom and gloom, and there is a purpose for our characters to keep pushing forward, and I think it shows great life lessons to not give up hope. So why? Why do these eggs exist? And what is the grander purpose to having them and choosing these girls? Wonder Eggs simply come out of a gachapon and no real word on how many you need to get before your wish is granted. You just kind of have to keep being resilient and keep pushing forward. We are also introduced to these doll-looking characters who are always outside and speaking to the kids as they grab new eggs. I did find it odd that nobody seemed to question the fact that these two were clearly not in human bodies, but we do finally get an explanation as to what is going on and the entire mystery behind Wonder Egg Priority. Things start to take an even darker turn as we find out this was all a part of an experiment where they were trying to create artificial life called Frill, and they were very successful. The problem though was the emotional aspect and jealousy of Frill. She gets jealous when Akka and Ura-Akka were not providing attention to her, and so Frill kills Akka's wife, and so with his rage, throws her down the stairs and locks her in a cage. Now, this is very important because going back to the Wonder Eggs, Momo was the first to finally reach her objective, and finally she freed her friend and brought her back to life. Or that's what we originally thought. Momo's friend fades away, and at this moment we don't know if she was an illusion or what is happening. But things now take a dark turn. A new character approaches which appears to have a human-looking body, but with a butterfly-looking face with wings. And it's really disturbing. And as expected, Momo is terrified, and before she can do anything, her pet that she became the mother to is violently murdered in front of her eyes, and this creature forces Momo to also eat her pet.
お前も食え
That is She is now mentally and physically traumatized, and we realize there are multiple of these creatures, and each of them equally terrifying. They each take on a churn, killing the pets and traumatizing the four of them. We know that Frill is responsible for creating these creatures. Terrifying creatures. And did I mention, they are terrifying.
私トットちゃんお前殺さないいい子ハイフンのまねっこだけど
So I hatches her next egg and finds out it's herself, and she has to help herself. We learn that these eggs are hatching people from another world, and she goes up against her teacher and realizes that the real version isn't a bad person and is good for her mom. She finally defeats this copy, and again, the symbolism she confronts is her own insecurities and assumptions. This is where the creepy monster shows up again and takes the eye of I, and that's when our I wakes up and realizes she's fine. The episode ends, which as of now, we think is the final episode and has absolutely no real ending. We have no idea what is going on and still don't understand what the purpose to any of this really even is. You watching this are probably just as confused as I am, but you are in luck because they ended up dropping one more episode. So let's go over that now.
愛ちゃん手伝ってくれる
So fans were patiently waiting for this special episode because as of now, we had no ending to this series, and it just abruptly ended without explaining anything about Akka, Uraraka, and Frill's creepy-ass creations, Dot and Kirara. So Cloverworks gave us a 1-hour special to help give us those conclusions. Let's break this down. So the 1-hour special had to allocate 12 minutes of ads, which that's fine. That's how formatting works in Japan. Every 30 minutes, they have to show 6 minutes of ads. Though the next 25 minutes is spent doing a recap of the previous episodes. And we already had a recap episode. So having another recap was just pointless, as this series was only 12 episodes to begin with. So now 45 minutes have been wasted and we get about 10 minutes of actual story. And you know what we get? More of nothing. Literally nothing. It honestly has to be one of the worst ending episodes I've seen in a long time. Maybe since Neon Genesis of Evangelion levels of bad. You can tell the animation is more rushed and not nearly as fluid as the prior episodes, but I do forgive Cloverworks for this as they were rushed to get this out and the overall animation was still pretty good. Though we are still left without understanding anything. What is Frill up to? What are her creations doing exactly? And just why? What's going on? I'm still just as confused as the rest of you, and now we need another special to properly help wrap up this entire thing again. So overall, this series had so much potential, and despite its flaws, I did still enjoy it for what it was. Though the glaring issues I had weren't that big of a deal, but the part that makes it hard to recommend is that you won't be getting any type of satisfactory conclusion. It leaves it open-ended and maybe they will set up a season 2, but we don't really know, and with that, we still don't understand the overall goal here for Frill. It feels like such a waste with a series that had such beautiful animation and incredibly deep subject matters to kind of just fizzle out and end the way that it did. But I guess it is what it is. Let me know in the comments if you are just as confused as I am about this overall series, and what did you think about it? Also, if you enjoyed this, consider subscribing, liking the video helps a lot too, and hit the bell to be notified when I drop my next video. So excuse me, I'm gonna head out and go for a walk to think about Wonder Egg Priority.